Oops. Bom dia. My entrepreneurial journey began in the mid-1990s. I had graduated from law school and learned one thing. I was never going to practice the law. So I moved to South America and began looking for inspiration. I was hoping to find my big dream. So I helped to build a university in Argentina. I worked for Ashoka in Latin America. But I found my inspiration from the entrepreneurial explosion that was happening back home. This was the era of Netscape and Yahoo. It was the early days of the internet. So I started reading about the entrepreneurial icons. And like many people, I fell in love with the Apple computer story. So I started telling it everywhere I went. And I remember I was actually in Sao Paulo. And after I'd given a talk to some university students, one young man came up to me after the talk and he said, Linda, I just talked about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak starting Apple Computer. I told it in English and Portuguese, in Spanish and Portuñol. I speak a little bit of Portuñol. And I thought this would really resonate. And one kid comes up to me after and he said, Linda, that's a nice story, but how does it relate to my life? I live in Latin America. No one will give me money for my crazy idea. And I don't even have a garage. So that's when I started thinking about the need for local role models and entrepreneurial success stories. My aha moment, which I will forevermore call my day one, happened in a taxi cab in Buenos Aires. You see, I learned that my taxi driver had an engineering degree. So I asked the obvious question, well, what are you doing driving a cab? He said, what else would I do? I don't want to work for the government, and the big companies aren't hiring. But you have an engineering degree. Why aren't you becoming an entrepreneur? A what? You know, an entrepreneur is someone who starts a business. Oh, empresario. I said, no es empresario, es otra palabra que significa innovación, riesgo. He looked at me and said, we don't have a word like this here. Now, I know I'm skipping ahead, but I have to say my favorite moment in my entrepreneurial journey happened a number of years later when the editor of the Portuguese-Brazilian dictionary called up our team at Endeavor Brazil and said, in part because of Endeavor's work, the words empreendedor and empreendedorismo were being added to the dictionary. So today, of course, not only does emprendedor exist in Spanish and Portuguese, there are words for entrepreneurship in Arabic and Turkish in almost every language. But believe me, 15 or 20 years ago, not only did these words not exist, but they seemed like impossibilities. So I went home, I had my big idea, and I told everyone that I was going to help build a movement to find and support entrepreneurs in emerging markets and tell their stories to inspire others. And this is what I got back. Everyone had another reason why this idea was terrible. People said, there are no entrepreneurs in emerging markets. Another person would say, well, even if you find these entrepreneurs, you can't trust them. Or my favorite was when people would tell me, you realize you're just trying to help build a middle class. But these rejections only made me more convinced of my idea. Yes, entrepreneurs help build a middle class, and this is a great thing. So that's when I developed my mantra, crazy is a compliment. And in fact, there was a New York Times story not too long ago that actually said there's a medical term to describe entrepreneurs in the startup phase. It's called hypomania. So you can go back and tell your parents or your boyfriend and girlfriend that, yes, we are just a little bit crazy. But the thing about being called crazy is you're often put in touch with other crazy people. So in fact, that's how I met my co-founder, Peter Kellner. And I shared my ideas for the movement. He had this name, Endeavor, and that's how we got started. So Peter went down to Chile. I went to New York to set up shop. And a little while later, I got a call. Linda, come down to Buenos Aires. You have a 10-minute meeting with Eduardo Elstein. Eduardo Elstein is a real estate entrepreneur who became a tycoon, turning George Soros's initial investment into the largest landowning estate in the country. So 5 minutes into this 10-minute meeting, Eduardo turns to me and he says, I get it. You want a meeting with George Soros. I'll see what I can do. And I said, no, I want you. I want your time, your passion, and $200,000. So he turns to his right-hand guy, Oscar, and he says, Esta chica está loca. And I said, Eduardo, I'm disappointed. You famously walked into George Soros' office and came out with a $10 million check. You're lucky I only asked you for $200,000. He looked at me, looked down, took out his checkbook, and wrote the check on the spot. The next call I got was from Beto Sucupira. So I flew down to Brazil and asked him for $2 million. And he wrote that check. So I realized that my mantra, crazy is a compliment, has a corollary. If you're not being called crazy, then you're probably not thinking big enough. Here's my crazy endeavor, our crazy endeavor in a nutshell. We have a theory of change, and that is that not all entrepreneurs are created equal. It's wonderful for people to start up any type of business, but the people that move the needle are what we call the high-impact entrepreneurs. We actually did a survey with Stanford Business School, the World Economic Forum, and Endeavor. We surveyed 200,000 companies across 30 markets, and what we found was just 5% of the entrepreneurs generated 2/3 of the jobs and 2/3 of the revenues. So if you want that growth, you have to find the high-impact entrepreneurs. Second, we said there are a lot of people focusing on startups. Endeavor will focus on scale-ups. So we really look for people that have gotten something off the ground and are at an inflection point, like our entrepreneur you just heard from Sedi. The third thing we said, which was very controversial, is that we are going to have a pay-it-forward model. We are going to start as a for-cause organization. I hate the word not-for-profit, but we're a for-cause movement. But our entrepreneurs, when they're successful, they will give back based on their success. And in fact, now our entrepreneurs are donating a percentage of their equity to the local Endeavor offices. And at Global, we started something called Endeavor Catalyst, where we're co-investing alongside lead investors on their terms, so we remain neutral. And eventually, we will be fully funded by the success of the Endeavor entrepreneurs. It's about paying it forward. And it's not just about Endeavor sustainability, it's about the ecosystem. So we are encouraging our entrepreneurs to become the angel investors, to become the mentors. That's where the multiplier effect happens. And so all of this is encapsulated by what we call mentor capital. While venture capital is very important, we believe that the role of mentors and networks is what's essential for entrepreneurs to grow. And I should say that the two of my mentors here, we have so many mentors from Brazil here in this room, and two of my personal mentors, Beto and also Jorge Paulo Lehmann, have really helped me move from Day1 to where we are today. Okay. So yesterday, some of you met Hernan Cazav, Mercado Libre, the eBay of Latin America, one of my inspirations. Another one of my favorite entrepreneur stories took place right here in Rio. This is Leila Velez. Leila grew up in a favela not far from here. Her first job was as a cashier in McDonald's, and she had a dream. And her dream was to bring beauty to poor people. So she called up her sister-in-law, Zika, who was a hairdresser, and they decided to create a beauty product for the Afro-Brazilian population. They went into Leila's kitchen, they concocted something, their husband tried out this potion, the husband's hair promptly fell out. But they started again. And when we met Leila and Zika, they had one salon outside of Rio, but they had a big idea for franchising. And when I tell this story around the world, most people assume this is a nice story of microfinance. And what I say is, there is nothing micro about Leila. Today, Beleza Natural has 26 hair clinics throughout Brazil. Last year, they generated more than $80 million in revenues. They employ more than 1,500 people, and their next stop is in Harlem in New York City. Wow. Okay. So 10 years after my day one, I'm inspired by the Mercado Libre boys, by Leila and Zika, and I'm thinking, I need to think big too. So Endeavor was in, I think, 9 countries. I go to my board with a big plan, 20 countries by 2020. Has a beautiful ring. The chairman of my board, Edgar Bronfman Jr., looks at me and says, I prefer the sound of 25 countries by 2015. I literally fell off my chair. But when I got up, I realized, you know what? This is the great thing about mentors. They challenge you. So that number, 25 countries by 2015, is our current goal. So we were in Latin America. We had started in South Africa and in the Middle East. But I thought, all right, if we're going to be big, 25 countries, 2015, we've got to be in India. Now, as you heard, our model usually works when someone like Eduardo or Beto calls us up and pulls Endeavor into a country. But instead, we landed in India and we said, India, here we are. And the local business leaders heard about our model of high impact entrepreneurship and capital cities and mentors. And they said, you know what, that's okay, nice, but we don't really need that. What we need is base of the pyramid in Calcutta. Do you want to do that? And we said, well, that's not our model. And they said, well, we don't need your model. And so we pulled out of India. And for years, I faced embarrassing questions. People would say, well, so Linda, what happened in India? And what I would say is we abandoned our model. Our model had always been be pull, don't push. And we abandoned that and we failed. And I actually wrote about this in this issue of Harvard Business Review dedicated to failure. Because I believe that you can't talk about entrepreneurship if you're not willing to talk about failure. So I failed and so can you. All right. So we had a clip here, but a clip can't play, but this took place this year. So today, Endeavor is 15 years old. We operate in we have offices in 18 countries throughout Southeast Asia, the Middle East, South Africa, Latin America. And I went on national TV to announce the launch of Endeavor Greece. And I thought, okay, this is going to be, easy. Greece needs help. And instead, Andrew Ross Sorkin, the anchor, this is like 6 o'clock in the morning, and he says to me, Linda, if you're going to start business in Europe, why on earth would you start in Greece? La chica loca again. But what I said, Andrew, when economies turn down, entrepreneurs look up. This is the best time to be an entrepreneur in Greece. And in fact, we started receiving phone calls from the other submerging markets, Spain and Portugal. Actually, I should say they're re-emerging. And Endeavor will soon, we operate in Greece now. We're setting up shop in Spain and Portugal, and we're actually bringing Endeavor to Miami. The world has changed. Brazil has emerged. So we think there are pockets of Europe and the United States where high impact entrepreneurship needs to thrive too. So I wanted to share a little bit of my lessons. What have I learned in this journey? So the first thing I learned is it's really interesting helping these high growth business entrepreneurs and yet running this for cause organization or movement. And what I realized is we have to take the best of all sectors if we're going to really achieve Leadership 3.0. And what I learned is that while financial rewards are very important to create incentives, what's more important is what I call psychic equity. People want to feel ownership of their work. They want to feel part of something bigger. And in fact, there's a study of about 30,000 employees who said if they could have social or environmental impact in their job, not only would they be twice as happy they thought, but they would be willing to take a pay cut. And I think for millennials, this is even more important. So we all have to think about not just the financial equity, but what psychic equity can we give to our teams. So this is my new favorite word. You've got to be flawsome. I actually stole it from a Coca-Cola marketing executive. It's just fantastic. It means be awesome in your flaws. Richard Branson is a master of this, but I want to tell you about a story closer to home. Yesterday, I was in the restaurant of Spoleto, led by Endeavor entrepreneurs Eduardo Urivio and Mario Chadi. And Spoleto, for those of you who don't know, is this fast food pasta place where you go in and you order different toppings, and the servers juggle, and it's supposed to be fun. And one day last year, Eduardo got a call, and the person on the phone said, check out this video I've just sent you by email. And Eduardo said, oh, is it good or is it bad? They said, it's bad. And what it was a spoof. This firm had done this spoof of Spoleto, where the server was waiting for this woman to order and she couldn't make up her mind, and he was getting increasingly frustrated as she was taking more time. And finally, the server's throwing palmitos at the poor customer. And this now has like 3 million views. And Eduardo and Mario made an interesting decision. Rather than call their lawyers and try to get this video off the internet, they called up the the firm that made the video, and they said, "We thought this was hilarious, and we want to work with you on a second video." So they created this script. They had the same actor play the server. They sent him to anger management class. They had him come back, and at the end of this spoof on the spoof, they actually invited customer comments. And Eduardo last night told me that Spoleto just won the second award for all of Brazil for the best marketing campaign in all of Brazil, behind only Itaú, the big financial institution, and ahead of Nike. Be flawsome. So many of the entrepreneurs that we meet at Endeavor are these great charismatic leaders. But I always tell them, if you want to really scale, you can't just be a one-man or one-woman show. You have to form a rock band. And a few years ago, I realized I was not taking my own advice. So I went to Fernando Fabre, the MD of Endeavor Mexico, and I said, "Fernando, I'd love to invite you to come to move to your family to New York and be COO of Endeavor Global." And he said, "No way, I'm not coming for that job title." So I said, "Okay, what if I made you president?" And he accepted my invitation, and today we just did a survey, and employee satisfaction has skyrocketed. Our entrepreneurs are much happier, and I've learned the important lesson of building a rock band and letting go. So as a woman leader, I often found or felt that I had to be strong and invincible, independent. But then a few things happened. I, 8.5 years ago, got pregnant with identical twin daughters. And then 3 years later, learned that my husband had developed an aggressive form of bone cancer. And I called up my board and I said, I just want to be honest. I know we're scaling, but I'm going to every chemotherapy session with Bruce. And when I'm not with him, I'm going to be watching over the girls that were then 3 to make sure that there's stability in our home. So I'm not going to be traveling anymore. And they were very supportive, but what was surprising to me is when I came back, that is Bruce Feiler, that's actually him in an advertisement for Memorial Sloan Kettering, the cancer center where he was treated. He's 4 years cancer-free and doing very well. So when I sort of came back to working full-time, I wasn't surprised that Endeavor had grown. I knew that this team that we had formed would step up to the challenge. But here's what did surprise me. Person after person came up to me and they said, "Linda, we always thought you had these big ideas and that was great, but we could never really relate to you as a person. So now that we know that you're actually human, that you've shown us you're vulnerable, it actually makes us want to follow you more." So there's a conversation that often says, go big or go home. Well, I believe you can go big and go home. Right now in the US, what everyone's talking about is a book called Lean In, written by a college friend of mine, Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook. And Sheryl has an important message. She's trying to give girls the self-confidence and gusto to get ahead in their professional lives. But we know, and she knows too, that life isn't all about work. And my girls are now turning 8. That's Tybee and Eden, my identical twin girls. And one of them said, I was leaving on a business trip once. I think they were about 4 or 5 at the time. And they pulled on my leg and they said, "Just remember, you can be an entrepreneur for a short time, but you are a mommy forever." This goes for daddies too. So that is why I am in Brazil for 1 day. I will get on a plane tonight and show up at drop-off tomorrow. Talk about day 1. So just to prove I'm not the only crazy person in my family, we were getting stuck as parents, and a couple years ago, my husband, Bruce Feiler, said to me, "All right, I've got this idea. What if he's the journalist, so what if I go to all around business and get the best ideas from business, and go to the military and get the best ideas from the military, and go to other professions and bring back the best ideas to help make our family work?" So I said, okay. So we ended up creating a family mission statement. We actually run these agile software development. And Bruce came out with a book called The Secrets of Happy Families. It is now number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list. We just learned last week it's being translated into Portuguese. Full disclosure, we are the clueless family looking for help. We are not the ones with all the answers, but nevertheless, what we've learned throughout this process, and Bruce actually has a TED Talk on this, is that business can learn a lot from families, and families can learn a lot from business. So I am now writing a book. I was jokingly saying that my goal was to become the Julia Child of entrepreneurship. So we tentatively entitled this Mastering the Art of Entrepreneurship, playing off Mastering the Art of French Cooking. But like every good 21st century entrepreneur, I'm going to crowdsource the title. So I encourage you all to go to lindarotenberg.net. You can vote on the current titles or come up with your own. It won't be ready for 2015. And any stories, any ideas, this is, I want this to be a collective enterprise. What I would love to say to all of you is whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur or a venture capitalist or a policymaker or a student, that really the key is what we learned when our team in Brazil did this marketing campaign, Bota pra fazer, make it happen. And I want to know one thing. Why does everything sound sexier in Portuguese? So let's make it happen. Let's keep the conversation going. And let's remember to stay a little bit crazy. Thank you.